So, welcome back to another episode of Gaming the System. We're joined once more by Chris, who we had along to talk about our writing in gaming episode recently. This little conversation is just going to be between the two of us, and it's going to be a supplemental episode where we expand on writing, as we mentioned very, very briefly at the end of our writing episode. Chris, you brought up the 40k universe, and I went. And I think Alex and Jem probably don't aren't particularly interested in it, but that's okay. That's perfectly fine. Um, we're also, if you're watching us, we're joined by Chris's cat.
Yes, this is Riley. So if he makes an appearance again, you know who he is.
It's like having cats wandering off on and off cam. So, Chris, we're going to start with tell me when and how you got started with 40k.
Sure. Okay, so this is a story of two parts. So I think I, like the vast majority of people, got into Warhammer when I was much too young to kind of really appreciate, number one, the hobby and the cost of the hobby. So myself and my good friends, we started playing when we were kind of pre-teens, up until we were young teenagers, and this was a long time ago. So I'm nearer to 40 than 30. So it was probably about 15, 20 years ago that we were first started playing. And then, like everyone does, we grew up and kind of parted away from the hobby. And then my two good friends in the last few years have really got back into it in a big way. And I was not roped in. I came back in relatively recently, and by relatively recently I mean within the last sort of year or so. So I have jumped straight into 40k 10th edition, and that's kind of where I have now really become an enthusiast hobbyist, as opposed to what we did when we were much younger, which was buy armies and paint them, but not really kind of fully invest ourselves in everything. And of course, it was a very, I don't know how long you've been playing, but it was a very different game back 20 years ago to what it is now. And so I got into my first army in this kind of new iteration of the hobby. 10th edition, got into Sisters of Battle, who are a faction that kind of appealed to me the most, and I got into them about a couple of months before the brand new codex came out. So that was really good because I obviously bought my first few models, could wait for the new codex. Bought the shiny new codex, which I was super happy about, and the army boxes, and have kind of been getting into them. And I've also very recently, literally within the last 2 weeks, decided on a second army, because the new Death Guard codex super appealed to me as well, and have spent far too much money on that. Although I'm ashamed to say I did not get the fancy new codex. I was one of the unlucky ones when the release came around. So that's me, and from a writing perspective, which I'm sure we'll discuss, one of the things that I was super keen to get into this time that I didn't so much when I was perhaps a young teenager is I've started to engross myself in all of the lore, and bought myself plenty of novels and all that kind of stuff to kind of give myself the full experience. So that kind of ties us into what we were discussing at the very end of that writing episode I was on.
I'm very pleased to hear that your one of your favourite legions is the Death Guard, because I'll introduce you to my entire army in a moment, and so I'm very, very proud of humble beginnings and all that. And Death Guard gives us the perfect opportunity to talk about toxic masculinity. And
Excellent.
I came up with that. I came up with that like 2 weeks ago, and I'm very, very pleased with that. Chortle. It's enough to make yourself laugh. It's fine.
Yeah, and me. But I can't not laugh at a pun.
Hopefully, a listener or viewer out there will, at least maybe one of them, will find it funny. Behold,
Hey.
my bodyguard.
Yeah.
He's just, in case anyone's watching, a great big massive table behind me just appeared, covered in Death Guard.
Yeah.
Uh, but if you are watching, you'll see that it's just my four little Plague Marines that I didn't. So we're gonna. This is the. I'm probably the antithesis to you. I think we couldn't be further apart in our journeys into 40k
Right.
because I the first I was like really aware of 40k was in the last year, and I'd
Mm.
been listening to. It started off with. No, actually, yeah, it started off with. Do you know the Mechanicus video game?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Have you played that?
I haven't, no. Although I have heard of it, and I was going to talk about video games because I would obviously want to bring up Space Marine 2 as well.
Absolutely. Um, so that was the first, like me getting. It's a really now that I'm more immersed into the universe in general. It
Sure.
really captures the flavour of the Adeptus Mechanicus,
Hmm.
and it's the Mechanicus versus the Necrons,
Yeah.
and the first off the trailer for it is awesome. It's just a Mechanicus Magos reciting a soliloquy, and
Yeah.
that I've listened to that so many times. I probably do it from heart, and with so many of the I've come across the bits and bobs of the reading that I found of it is there are so many pockets of fabulous writing in the
Yeah.
40k universe, and they don't necessarily pop up where you'd expect. So you can have it in a random uh, a random trailer to one of the games, and
Hmm.
just the vibe of the game was just really titillating. And then that led me to the Lutin9 YouTube channel,
Yes.
who is probably the chief lore master of 40k. Are
Yeah.
you familiar with him?
I am. Yeah, I am very familiar. A lot of sleepless nights have been absorbed.
Yeah, he's I there's do you listen to Elden Ring lore as well?
I don't know, and you did recommend it to me when we were talking last time about Elden Ring, because and and I think I'm right in saying that the 40k universe is probably the most expansive piece of kind of fictional lore universe. I don't think there's a larger one. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but I do think that it's, if not the biggest, almost certainly the biggest in terms of the just the sheer amount of kind of law, and not just law, like good law, right? Like law
Yeah,
that you know
absolutely.
you've got layers of political intrigue, of complexity, of obviously war, and that's one of the points that's worth making. So if anyone's listening who appreciates world building, if nothing else, just the sheer scale and the impressive nature of the lore building in the 40k universe is something to behold. That YouTube series, I'm not too sure how long it's been going, but it's been going long enough for there to be a lot of incredibly in-depth episodes, just covering the lore of 40k.
Honestly, I can't think of any even if you just think of it in sheer terms of word count. I doubt
Mm.
there's a fictional universe that has the sheer word count that the 40k one does.
Yeah, I can't think of either, and it's kind of interesting to me because and I bring up the kind of love of the universe and the creation, but that there are some themes in there, right? It's uh, as far as grimdark goes, that's about the definition, right? It's pretty grimdark, and I guess uh, everyone might have their own kind of definition of grimdark, but it's pretty grim, um, and the focus of the lore is always that there is war, right? It's not. There's no downtime. You have multiple factions, and again, for those of you who don't know it, it covers everything from robots to kind of gross aliens, to obviously genetically enhanced human beings, to kind of ethereal space elves, space orcs, and obviously inspired by a whole lot. But the fact that the world is never not, or the universe is never not at war with one faction or another, and there's even, right, you even have factions, say, humanity, that are fighting in of themselves, right? So you're looking at a grand theme of nothing ever sits still. It's super grimdark, and everything is at war. So from a writing perspective, which I guess brings me to the first point I want to make, is that when you absorb yourself in the lore, you understand all the history and how everything kind of ticks over. But when you're setting stories in this world, where the grand theme is, whenever who is reading your books or absorbing your material is coming with the premise of, or is coming with the kind of forethought, I guess, if that's the right word. When is the fighting going to happen? That makes telling a story, in my opinion, quite difficult, because you've got an expectation, and maybe it's your audience, where you've got people who are coming to your book or your video game or whatever, and video games are obviously slightly easier to do this, which is basically like, I've bought this book because I play the game, and the game fundamentally is a war game. There's two armies that opposite each other. When is this going to happen in this book? And I wonder if you're an author or you're a writer and you've kind of got that overall looming presence of when are they all going to start killing each other, how that impacts you as a writer setting a story.
And the skill of the writer that you have to do, because it's the writing of action and fighting and that shit is it's just word count, really. You can come up with ideas and then write them as in as long form as you possibly can. I tried listening to the start of, so there's the Horus Heresy series, and then there's the Solar War series, which is the Siege of Terror. And I've not read many of the books. The ones I have read, I've certainly read the first four of the Horus Heresy. I think those ones are fabulous. And I thought, right, I'll skip to the end of the Horus Heresy and see what this Siege of Terror is about. But then I remember us talking about it in the writing episode, how that dialogue is the hardest thing to write. And if you take all of the descriptive stuff out of the start of the first Solar War book, it's like maybe 4 pages of worth of actually spoken words, and I go, that's a bit of a cop out, because the fighting is fighting, but the thing that makes it interesting is why we're fighting, and why are they fighting, and what are the stakes, because otherwise you go, like, what's the worst that can happen? And go, oh yeah, there'll be another battle. Whereas in I reread the Horus Rising book recently, and there's so much. I like the depth of the Space Marines that are on display in it, because I have a lot of gripe about the writing in the Space Marine 2.
Yeah.
I don't know what your opinions are on it.
I know we spoke about it briefly the last time we were on the podcast. It's pretty poor. Like, and I think that goes back to what I was just saying, which is 90% of people playing that game, they aren't going to care if the dialogue's good or not. Like they genuinely don't. All they want to see is the great big advanced humans shoot the aliens, right? And the amusing thing to me is that that's exactly why people are playing the video game and also playing the board game, right? Is like yeah, and I think just to talk about the game briefly. I think 10th edition for me is the best iteration of the game, if only because I remember when we were playing as teenagers, and literally all you did was line your armies up, and it was last man standing. Whereas now, the way that the game works is there are objectives, and you can kind of get secondary points, and you've got a lot more to do. And the reason that they've done that is is because a lot of the armies are hideously imbalanced, right? So you've got your kind of ancient race of AI robots with their guns that can literally phase you out of existence, right? And you're up against, say my army, the Sisters of Battle, who are women, who are just ordinary women. Okay, granted, they've got power armor, but they're not going to stand a chance. But what you can do when you play the game is you can play for objectives, and the thing I love about the Sisters of Battle, one of the things I love about them is that fundamentally they're martyrs. They don't care whether they live or die anyway. When I read the novels, though, that's quite difficult to write and write
Yeah,
well, right?
yeah.
Because in the same way that I've got a Space Marine novel which I did enjoy, which I'll talk about in a second, but it's got a similar problem to writing Space Marines, right? In that if you're trying to write Sisters of Battle, or the only way really you can write Sisters of Battle who are ideologized, brainwashed from a from a young age, or pretty much from birth, into this kind of heretical order. Sorry, the opposite order of kind of religious fanatics. You know, that's a really difficult thing to write because they've really only got one thing going for them, which is, we love the emperor, we worship the emperor, we've been brainwashed to kind of have this guy as a god. He is our god, and we will do whatever in his name. We will fight for his name, we will burn in his name, we will do all the stuff in his name, right? Which is fine when they're on the battlefield screaming and firing flamethrowers and doing all this kind of stuff. What do they
When
do in their
they're on a ship
downtime?
on the
Yeah,
way on the massive long space journeys, what do they
yeah.
talk about?
What do they talk about? And every single book that I've seen Space Marines do that, and I've seen Sisters Battle do that, they never get it right. It never feels right. And I've got two examples. The first one is a Space Wolves novel, called, and I'll get it right because I do recommend it. It's called Blood of Assaheim, by Chris Wright. And it's essentially Space Wolves versus Death Guard, in its simplest form. But what they do, a couple of things in it that's quite cool. And the first thing they do is they bring a Space Wolf who has gone to join the Death Watch, and they bring him back from the Death Watch into his pack, and he's immediately ostracized and is outcast. Because Space Wolf's whole thing is that they're a fighting pack and they fight together and they're Vikings essentially, and and so one of the main characters is immediately kind of at odds with that, and has spent a time outside of that environment, and now has questions how they've always done things, and all of that sort of stuff. So that was straight away an interesting dynamic for me, because there's a bit of conflict there between characters who are usually, as we were just talking about Space Marine 2, right? They're all together, they call each other brother a lot, and they shoot, and so, but what you're doing is you're kind of adding a little bit of complexity, which is just enough to make it interesting, because he's there going, we all grew up on this planet. I've seen things that none of you have, and I question the ways and the decisions and all of this kind of stuff. And the second thing they do, which is kind of interesting and cool, is Sisters of Battle are in it, which is the reason why I read it in the first place. But they are not the focal point of the story. They are secondary. And in so doing, they can do all the stuff that the Sisters of Battle are famous for, but you never have to sit down and talk to one for any length of time, because fundamentally they haven't really got a lot to say in of themselves in their kind of brainwashed world. I'm sure they're having great conversations with each other, but writers like Danny Ware who write Sisters of Battle books, and she kind of has them as obviously talking about honing their combat skills and or their kind of ritual and their prayer and all that kind of stuff. That's fine, but it's not very interesting the second, third, fourth time you hear it, right? And so, but in this Space Wolves novel, you don't get any of that. All you get is the kind of Sisters Battle reaction. So obviously when the Nurgle plague enters this city that the Space Wolves are trying to defend, one of the things, and apologies, spoiler warning, one of the things that they ask the Sisters of Battle to do is cleanse half a city, because everyone's getting infected and they need to cut the spread off. And the sisters go, "Yep, we're on that. We will, absolutely no remorse. We've got it." And it's moments like that I like to see, that kind of they've used the kind of some of the pins that if you're a fan of the army you kind of want to see and expect to see. They've kind of used that as a plot device, which I like, rather than the kind of the army's gimmick being stretched out across a whole novel. Do you see what I mean?
So they rather than putting the entire novel on the back of the sisters, they bring the sisters in to be a specific thing at a specific time.
Correct. Yeah.
That
Yeah.
reflects, because I completely get what you mean. I get, so recently when we were talking about Baldur's Gate 3, there are two characters that are basically cult
Yep.
members, and they just, every other sentence is something to do with the cult. You just go
Yeah.
bored, talk about
Yep.
something else. And I have this, so favorite my three favorite factions. There are the Adeptus Mechanicus, the
Mm-hmm.
first, my first road in. Then the Tyranids,
Mm-hmm.
because the Tyranids are so terrifying, and my and then Death Guard. I can't remember exactly
Yep.
why I like the Death Guard, but they're just cool and sick. And
Yep.
Mortarion is, I would love to have a Mortarion at some point.
It would be a badass model to get, wouldn't it? And pay. I'm a little bit intimidated by it, but I will do it eventually. And what is super amazing about the Death Guard in this Space Wolves novel is that because they are the antagonist, but he does add in that kind of giddy happiness that the possession of Nurgle has. So they aren't just kind of mindless. Like there is a kind of like that they are animated, but in a way that you're not expecting, because there's a joy there from, if anything, and it's really creepy. It's very cool.
I love the so one thing that they a fabulous thing about this universe is the I find the Emperor and the Primarchs and the Space Marines a
Hmm.
fascinating dynamic, because when it's the Golden Emperor with his perfect genetic sons, these
Yep.
noble, like, demigod figures, and they talk about the parade on Ulanor when the Emperor went, we've done all the hardest stuff. I'm going to go back home and work on a secret project. I'll leave it in your hands. And from the perspective of the Space Marines and the humans, which is where we spend the most of our time, you you just see these godlike figures who seem completely infallible. But then
Yep.
as soon as you get into a room with one of the Primarchs or two of the Primarchs, you see that it's the fact that it stayed together and seemed so cohesive was because the Emperor was in charge. But
Mm.
then when you just take it only takes 2 years for it all to fall apart because and then uh, you meet Mortarion and he's got this fabulous like breathing apparatus that
Mm-hmm.
feeds him horrifying like poisonous mixtures from all over the universe, and the fabulous drinking the cup scene with
Mm-hmm.
drinking the most poisonous thing they can find from a certain place. And you go, this is a demigod being. Why would they be so? They are born to be. If all the other Primarchs weren't there and the Emperors weren't there, they would lead. They would lead. They come to be. They're genetically bred to be leaders.
Mm.
And you give him an opportunity to become the most putrid, poisonous, toxic thing in existence, and you say, "Oh, but what about the Imperium and the Golden God Emperor?"
Mm.
And then you look at the World Eaters who want to just slaughter everything and annihilate everything, and finding these incredibly not all Space Marines are exactly the same. They're all not all just brother shouting
Mm.
meatheads like they come across in Space Marine 2. They are these incredibly strong characters where you go, why would anyone want to be a Plague Marine?
Yes.
You go, obviously these guys would obviously want to be that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and they're given like it's like the vampire thing, isn't it? You're given the choice. You know, do you want this kind of power and this kind of immortality? A lot of people go, yeah, of course I do. Like you know, and I will. Another example for you, because one thing that I've found from reading a lot of Warhammer literature is that a lot of success seems to be had in smaller formats. So I guess another sister's book, but the Book of Martyrs is a collection of short stories, and I liked that as a format. Some of them are better than others. One of the ones in the Book of Martyr that is really good is, and it starts off like all Warhammer stories do at a battle. But a Sisters of Battle is taken captive by the Tau, and then the rest of the story is literally just an interrogation, and it is incredibly amusing. And it wouldn't be able to last for a whole novel's worth of this, but it's kind of perfectly encapsulates sort of what you were just talking about as well, about the way that the Warhammer 40k concepts lead to such amazing kind of moments. Is you have the Tau trying to convince a Sister of Battle that their way of thinking is better, and this is absolutely devoutly saying no in spite of all logic and reason. So you've got the Tau. The concept of this story is that the Tau do what they have done for centuries to this planet. They basically kind of softly take it over by providing the local citizens with trade and all this kind of stuff. But you just have to kind of subtly accept the Tau rule. And the Imperium obviously hate that idea because it's their planet. But obviously it's the battles there. They don't have the resources, and so the Tau managed to obviously fight the remainder of the forces and just take this Sister of Battle hostage to learn basically what, how and why these people exist, and they're basically saying like you everything that we have given you, everything that we're presenting to you is a better way and existence for these people, and also, you know, everything that you believe in is clearly ludicrous, it's false, and to have a Sister of Battle just be like, I will burn you the slightest chance I get. I will kill you, and then I'll kill myself, and I don't care. And just the absolute exasperation of the Tau with this is that's like genius. That it's so good. but again, can only exist in a short story format. And so, and I think that they've been doing that with some success. Have you seen any of the Warhammer Online animations?
Think so. Did you watch Secret Level? Came out
No,
recently. Oh, it's fucking sick.
no.
It's a basically like 10, 20-minute animated episodes, each one
Okay.
based on a particular video game universe.
Oh yeah, yeah, and one, yeah, I remember one being based on. Yeah, I didn't see it, but it rings a bell.
Yeah, and that was awesome. And
Yeah,
I've massively come round to how extraordinary short stories can be very
yeah,
recently. And the it's like there's nothing worse than a long book written by a bad writer,
hmm,
and you can have like a 2-page story written by an incredible writer that it shows that it's just a different kind of art form. It's not
yeah,
just like taking a chapter out of a bigger book. Sometimes stories can punch in a different way when they're shorter.
yeah.
Um,
Although I do.
so
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, so what were these online Warhammer
Oh yeah,
videos?
yeah. I will. Let me just find them. So they're kind of official Games Workshop kind of animations, and they released them unfortunately through Warhammer TV, so it requires obviously the subscription. But they a lot of the content on there is really good. But the one that was the one that I watched, it was in 4 parts. I think they might still be on YouTube. Is called Pariah Nexus. And again, it's Sisters Battle because that was kind of how how I was absorbing it. But it's a really well done, incredibly well animated, but nice little animation. And again, in short story format. So I almost wonder if for a universe as expansive and as kind of just filled with lore and concepts and kind of interesting moments, that maybe that's a better format to tell these kinds of stories in. It
I think you've
and
like
I
in.
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say like it's when with a universe this big, there's infinite opportunities for writers to come in
Hmm.
and do things. So yeah,
Yeah, and I think that and and I don't know if it's doing it a disservice to say that they a lot of the concepts rely on one or two points of interest, and maybe it's your user base, maybe you're satisfying both, because like you said, like you've said, say you have newfound respect for kind of short story format because if you're a good writer you can really make that work, but you're also satisfying your people who are waiting for something to kick off and for the guns to start going, and maybe that is a fast way of kind of appeasing both audiences. And I'm just thinking that in my experience in a long novel format, I think the only successful one that I read, in my opinion, was the Space Wolves book, because it combined three, and did it successfully well and wasn't too long. And there was a bit of kind of complexity in the characters there. Like I say, so some of the other sisters novels that I read were novel in length, or novella, I guess, were heading towards that point I was talking about earlier, where they were just starting to become repetitive, because there's only so much that Sisters Battle can sit and talk about before it starts becoming boring. There was one novel that I read. I think it's Mark of Faith, but don't quote me on that. Where it was Sisters versus Thousand Sons, and that was kind of interesting, because that was the first thing that I read where the one of the pins for sisters is that they, in their ideology, are super easy to manipulate by chaos, because basically all you need is a way to communicate to sisters of battle that what they are doing is the emperor's will, and then you can get them to do basically anything. And that was basically the whole kind of twist of that novel. So again, spoiler if you haven't read that, but that was kind of super interesting. Is that a lot of the quest for these relics that they were going on were actually chaos just getting them to do stuff. And that was quite nice. But again, you can only really do that once, and then that's your kind of that's your novel told. You So again, maybe even for that one, a shorter format would have cut down trimmed a lot of the fat, I guess.
Think it would. I think probably one of the hardest things would be to write the Sisters of Battle versus the Tyranids.
Yes, yeah, because there is nothing. There is no, and again, like there is a short story where that happens,
Is it?
and yeah, I can't, and I'll send you offline the book it's in, because I'd have to double check it. It might be Book of Martyrs, but I'm not too sure. But it would make sense being the Book of Martyrs. But one of the and orcs again difficult, because Tyrannid's motivation and Orc's motivation are similar, although at least Orcs can sort of speak English, right? And there is in the another compilation of sisters short stories. There is a short story which has sisters in it, but is written from the point of view of orcs, and the whole thing is written in first person about in how orcs speak, and that was heavy going. It was good, it was fun, it was interesting, but heavy going. But yeah, I was kind of with Space Marine 2. I was a little bit disappointed that the antagonist was Tyranids, and I think Chaos are in it as well. But I feel like Tyranids are always the easy option, because you don't really need to give them any motivation.
Yeah, that's my the most uh, sort of just it can't be disappointing because that's what the Tyranids are. It's that I want to. I was desperate to find as much Tyranid lore as I could,
Yeah,
because one of my absolute favourite looting videos is the first contact with Tyranids, and
yeah.
it's only about a half hour long, but it's just the most gripping, horrifying thing
Mm.
story. But it's the same. It's the same. Like horrifying Tyranids appear, do horrifying
Hmm.
thing to planet, move on. They're
Yeah.
like a natural disaster. You can't write much from a position of a tsunami or a hurricane. It's just it comes through.
I do like, and you might have come across this in the lore, but there is an Inquisitor who deals with a Tyranid invasion of planets, literally by blowing up planets
Mm,
around where it's happening,
yeah,
and that I really like, because it's ludicrous. To basically have and obviously because the 40k universe is so expansive that you can have stuff like that, and you just sacrifice a few billion lives, and then and then your problem has gone away. They can't spread any further, and you just kind of cross that off on a map and then move on with your existence. And I do like that, just for the there isn't another world where you could get away with doing something like that and have someone go, yeah, that tracks.
yeah. And the one fabulous, well, a particularly fabulous area that I think games like when you have writing like in Space Marine 2, it misses the point of a grimdark universe in that it's a, a it's a satire of reality, because it's going there are no good guys here.
Hmm.
There's only war for a reason. It's not just a theoretical thing. If you try and you've got a million a million human worlds out there, and you think, right, how are we supposed to manage that? If we go, right, even if we had no external threats, then there would be chaos anyway. And
Mm.
we've got as many external threats as you could imagine. We could be allies with every other sentient race, and then the Tyranids can come in from outside the galaxy, and you go, oh shit! And then they've got their the gene stealer cults and
Yeah.
all sorts of things, and orcs and things that are infinite threats. Like the orcs are basically endless, and then the Necrons
Yeah.
appear out of nowhere, and it's and then you have people go, oh, but the Space Marines are cool. These are like alpha males. This is how all men should want
Mm.
to be. So for one thing, they don't have any sexual organs. They
Hmm.
get them carved out. So that's one thing that just you can't try and draw like black and white comparisons between the
Yeah.
real world and 40k.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Um, and one of the things that always slightly irritates me is when, and Space Marine 2 is guilty of this, where they paint the Space Marines as the good guys. Where yeah, against the Tyranids, sure, but you know that just in the scale of the 40k universe, the vast majority of those millions of worlds you've mentioned will have never seen a Space Marine. You know, and you know, having all those Space Marines on that one world, and then having like Minus Calgar turn up at the end and all this kind of stuff is like
That's just
you're
so
really,
bullshit, frustrating.
yeah, you're just kind of you're taking obviously such a vast and impressive world building feat, and you're narrowing it and you're narrowing it and narrowing it until you know, you're left with
It's
only
like a Marvel movie. Oh,
yes,
Iron
yeah,
Man
yeah,
showed
yeah,
up at the end. Awesome.
yeah. And I think that that's my point, is that like, and they do it all the time with Star Wars. You know, like I'm kind of a bit sick of stories about Jedi. You
Mm.
know, you like you, and I get I get the first trilogy because the Jedi, the core, whatever it was, that kind of stuff. But like, I don't want to see stories about other Jedi. I want to see like you've got a massive, expansive universe there. Tell me an interesting story. You know, tell me something where the stakes are equally, no, not equally high. I like really low stakes, right? And
That
that
feel
was what
like
was really
they're
cool.
high stakes.
Sorry.
But when it feels like the universe is on the line,
Yes.
but it doesn't have to be.
No, no, and that was what was really cool about, and it's the name of it is falling out the back of my head now. Um, the the bounty hunter. What's his name?
And go Fett or the
Yeah.
Mandalorian.
Yes, that was it. Sorry, I had a momentary brain lapse. But yeah, so the first season of that, where you know it's relatively low stakes, but you were getting so much kind of interesting stuff happening around in terms of the lore and the planets and all that kind of stuff. Those are the kinds of things that I really feel like if they were progressing in making a TV show of 40k, which I think they are, because I know that Henry Cavill is involved and all this kind of
Mm.
stuff. I really hope they're not trying to, I don't know, tell all of the Horus Heresy in 8 episodes, or do you see what I mean? Like, I really hope they're grounding it in a kind of a time and a place, and they're telling a very specific
Specific thing.
story.
Yeah.
Yeah, but something low stakes and something where you're giving your writers room enough to create characters or use existing characters that can expand and fill the space that they are given, not the other way round.
Yeah. Because it's the the problem with and the beautiful thing about the biggest like universe like fictional universe ever is that not everything can be the fate of the universe is in balance. Not everything.
Yeah.
The reason the Horus Heresy is so massive is because it's the thing that shapes the entire universe forever
Yeah.
more. And if you can't write something bigger than the civil war between the
Yeah. Yeah.
two most powerful halves of the Imperium, and you don't need to.
No.
You can
No,
have. Oh, go ahead.
that's been written, right?
Hmm.
Like it's kind of happened, and I know it's kind of feels like a dumb thing to say, but like that exists. I know, and that's why I know you said you've read some of the Horus Heresy books and they are good. So I will dip my toe into those. I think, but I kind of feel like it's happened. I know what's happened.
Hmm.
You know, tell me an interesting story that I haven't read either. You know, through lore or by other means, because they're definitely out there. You know, without a doubt. And if some of the things that we've been talking about today kind of mean anything in terms of what is successful, then I think that you basically what you have to do is you have to unfortunately appeal to your audience that want to see Space Marines shoot people. Like you're going to have to do that because that's what sells the franchise. They've kind of made Space Marines, whether you like them or not, they are the kind of staple of the franchise, right? So you can't not have them, and so even then you're kind of cutting away almost 70% of what you can actually do if you're saying that your story has to include Space Marines, right? And so I get it because you're playing a video game. Of course, you're going to want to play a Space Marine and have a big axe and cut Tyranids apart. I would like to. That'd be fun. But when I do that, the writer in me goes, "Yeah, but why? Why am I doing this? What is my motivation for this? You know?" And that's what they've really got to get right. Like I want to see the cool stuff, but I also want to. You got to have the multiple levels of it.
I this is a massive gripe that I have with writers like the Space Marine ones. Is like they are definitely given a brief and going, right, you're not in charge of this project. You're not in charge of the you're not in charge of this. You don't get to dictate exactly what happens and why it happens. You have to write stuff within this set of guidelines.
Yeah,
And surely a writer would go, well, they want me to write this, they want there to be no subtext. But you must surely writers in games like that, they can't go, well, there are no deep space marines. It's not like there's any law or written work to point out, oh yeah, space marines are all unique and different and distinctive. You can write space marines that are really cool and badass, but also don't just say brother to each other constantly and have
yeah,
completely surface level
yeah.
discussions. And you just need to sit back and go, right, what these marines have been through. Because the one of the first things uh, in in Horus Rising, in the first Horus Heresy book, is it's Garviel Loken, who's one of the Horus's captains, talking to a basically a journalist. And you think, why would a space marine talk to a journalist? Because it's Horus wants the journalists to know what the Great Crusade was about. So it's not just about killing things. And he says that Space Marines have fear bred out of them, which comes to another toxic masculinity thing of going, oh, these are alpha males, they don't feel fear. But when cataclysmic things happen, they feel something. They don't just go, oh, the emperor was just, my primarch's been slain, my legion has turned against me. You don't just go stoically go, oh, time to fight the next battle.
Hmm.
Writers, you have to look at the like the richness that this particularly relentlessly bleak universe gives you the option to, because
Hmm.
a fabulous, like, the core satire of all of it is that the emperor is a god, and the what arguably starts the turn to chaos is when the word bearers, he finds out that the word bearers were worshipping him as a god,
Hmm.
and he loses his shit and basically breaks the word bearers, and so they go and find another god.
Yep.
And then once everything's said and done and he's interred on the golden throne, the Sisters of Battle, his most zealous warriors, are the kind of people who he would have hated their existence.
Yeah. And that's what's super cool as well. And I love so much the. I mean, it's laced with hypocrisy and all this kind of stuff, which is one of the reasons why it's cool. Because, like you say, it's satire. But I love so much that I love the implications that Sister Battle in particular are so obviously anti chaos, anti demons, anti all that kind of stuff. And there's a heavy implication that Saint Celestine is a demon, and obviously that whole thing about the Emperor, you know, being the most powerful psyker that's ever existed. Whereas, you know, all the Sisters of Battle do is spend a lot of their time hunting and slaying psykers, you know, in the name of a god who isn't really a god. You know, is kind of super clever and interesting. But again, we're talking broad concepts here, right? Tell me a good story in those concepts and I'm on board. That's all you've got to do. It's like basic rules of storytelling. It's not good enough just to give me a battle in an interesting concept, because I'll be interested for about 2 minutes and then I'm bored. Like, and it can only work like that. You've got to go back to your basic rules of storytelling. Give me motivations. Give me character led decision making. Give me all those things, and then give me the cool battle in the cool concept, and
Makes it even
you've done
better.
it. Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Because like the I played the first few hours of. We'll bring this to a close as we nearly got up to an hour. This has been really fun, and
Sure, sure.
clearly, I think we've got a lot more. We've got a lot more we could talk about, so we'll probably have to come back and do this again. Um,
Yeah, that sounds good.
I played it for about 2 or 3 hours, and then the I stopped playing it because the writing was so bad.
Hmm.
It 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 spoiled the game for me. In terms of gameplay, it was fine. The gameplay was fine, but it wasn't good enough to ignore to put up with the writing for it. Um,
Yeah,
and but then when I played Final Fantasy VII Rebirth,
yep,
the story and the characters were utterly gripping. I loved it all the way through, but the combat was absolute dog shit,
mm.
absolute boring, pointless. I skipped through it as much as I could, but the writing
Mm.
was so good that I didn't care.
Yep.
And so the perfect mix is when you get writers who can write compelling stuff, and then you add the gameplay together with that. And
Yeah.
I'll end with like I wonder. So I don't play 40k yet. I am learning and consuming lore and watching battle reports and live live 3 hour games, trying to work out how it works. I'm also working, so I'm a video editor, and I'm
Right.
practicing turning a full match into like a 40-minute battle report.
Sure.
So that's helping as well. And I like to imagine when I'm looking at a game, thinking about what the possible story could be behind what's happening on the table.
So when you first play your first game, that is the most fun you will have. You can play competitively. I'm sure people do and have a great time. And there's a meta and all of that kind of stuff. Fill your boots. But when I sit and play Magic the Gathering, or I sit and play Warhammer or Dungeons and Dragons, and I get this is the main reason you play Dungeons and Dragons, but the wargaming stuff, in particular 40k, is the first thing we do is we sit down and we go, right, why are our armies here?
I
What are
like
they
that.
doing?
Yeah,
What are they
I
trying to
like that.
achieve? Because if you don't do that, in my opinion, it's boring. And you can turn up to tournaments all you like, and you can play and you can win, and I guarantee you will not have as good a time as the game you play with your mates where you've discussed, at length. And that's where that's where all the good moments are. When you're down to your last few units and you've got a sisters battle completely surrounded by Tyranids, and they're going down in the next turn, but
You
you
don't
know what?
surrender.
You roll some really good
Roll the
dice,
dice.
and yeah, and you just they take out the Carnifex in some freak incredible dice roll, and then they all get eaten, and it's great, and that's what it is, and yes, you'll lose the game, but it doesn't matter because you've had a great time and you've told a good story, and that's what I think some of the fiction that I've read, just to kind of summarize what I've been rabbiting on about for the last hour, is that magic is difficult to capture in fiction, and I've seen moments of it more in the short format, but yeah, I think that there's hope for the TV series if they can do that.
I I am slightly apprehensive because Hen- Henry Cavill's an incredible actor. Incredible actor. Seems like a lovely bloke. Um, but the reason The Witcher happened was because of him. He
Mm.
was the driving force that led that because he's Henry Cavill. But he doesn't seem to have. It wasn't smashed out of the park,
Yeah.
and it it feels like if he approaches 40k the same way he seems to have approached The Witcher, that's worrying because he's an actor first, and
Yep.
in order to if he had just played Geralt and didn't have any role in the running of the show, that would be different, and it's so worrying because and like if I've not watched any of the Rings of Power series, but by all accounts, it's just awful.
Right.
Um, and you just think it's a good thing that Warhammer is such an expansive and infinite universe because even if it happens and it's the worst thing ever, you can I can go and listen to that half hour first contact with the Tyranids thing over and over again.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Like I say, it would be a shame if it was to receive such kind of high viewership and it not be the best example of what what all the concepts in the world is capable of. Just as an aside, I know we're about to wrap up, but one of the things that absolutely frustrates me no end about The Witcher is the production design is so inconsistent. I don't know if you've noticed this, but like the clothes that the people wear, they haven't seemed to find a cohesive like design. So when you watch the Lord of the Rings films, and
Mm.
everything is so intricate and fits into the world and seems to kind of cohesively work. now when you watch The Witcher, have a look at some of the things people are wearing and be like, how, how did they make that? Or why are they wearing that as opposed to not this? And once you've seen that, it's really, really difficult to unsee it. And, you get some of the characters in The Witcher that are dressed like they're going to some sort of 80s rock kind of convention. And then you get some that are kind of wearing, armor that seems really impractical for no good reason. It's just really weird, and not only does the writing suffer and all of that kind of stuff, but yeah, I think they didn't nail the production design of it either.
Just that feeling of bad decisions have been made here,
Yes.
and there are things that sort of you'd think that there are people in the room that would go, oh yeah, that's obviously a terrible idea, and then you go through ideas until you find, right, these are all the good ideas, and we'll throw
Yep.
away the bad ones, rather than right, we've got Henry Cavill as Geralt, good idea. Everything else,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah. I think it was very much held up by a couple of good decisions, and then and maybe that's why Rings of Power hasn't been so highly rated, because there aren't really any good decisions in it.
and the way it looks as well. There's a meme of uh, it's like Boromir and Faramir, like showing their armor as like the twilight of Gondor when it's on its
Yeah.
last legs, and then Gondor at the height of its power, and he's wearing like a
Yes.
dinner
Right.
plate hanging around his
Yeah.
neck, and you go, Jesus Christ,
And
how does
and
this
and
happen?
and that kind of stuff is and okay, I don't work in a multi-billion-pound studio, so maybe there isn't the level of QA that I'm expecting there should be, right? But it can't surely rest on that, where they've basically gone, you show somebody, don't you? It's like, these are my ideas for the Gondorama, and somebody goes, no, this isn't going to work, this isn't going to fit, you're going to need to redo this, because this is, do you see what I mean? Somebody with some sort of creative vision has to have given that the okay, or
And
not,
like
as the case may be.
it's and again, like the Tolkien universe is massive as well, and like with 40k, the writers have no excuse for poor writing, because you could go, right, look at the entire back catalogue of
Hmm.
of the 40k universe, and they could go, oh well, we've never seen it on screen before, and they go, well, that's an argument could be made. But with Lord of the Rings, literally some of the most iconic cinema ever produced, the richest like films ever made. You just go, literally, if we just
Yeah.
copy that and start from there. But
Yeah.
we'll have to come back and talk about the Tolkien universe another time as
I'm
well, because
sure,
we've barely
I'm
scratched the
sure we will,
surface.
but yeah,
Um,
absolutely, sounds good.
right, thanks very much, Chris, for joining us once again. Everyone for watching or listening, and we will see you guys next time. Bye bye.